as we all know, conservatives and right-wingers are attacking Florida's LGBTQ plus community, along with other members of the society like women, Black, African Americans, immigrants, students. Can I put more people in this bucket? It's not a new development. Since the election of Ron Desantis as the governor of the state, things have moved quickly from bad to worse. However, there are people and community leaders working hard and ensuring that there is a fight to ensure safety, equity, and equality for all members of the society. Our guest today is the current Fort Lauderdale City Commissioner. He holds an extensive experience in public service and has been an LGBTQ plus leader in our community of Fort Lauderdale since he, Steve Glassman, and his husband moved to the city in 1994. So welcome to Unapologetically Queer. I'm your host, Al Ferguson, and I'm proud to talk to some of the most interesting people of our LGBTQ plus community that are the most interesting to the LGBTQ plus community. This program is unique because it is an unedited conversation. At Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, our mission is based on the 10 pillars of the LGBTQ plus community. We believe our history, but even more important, our future, are based on the communities of Black LGBTQ plus, Latino, lesbian and queer women, trans, students and youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS healthcare, business, social justice, and faith. Our local communities have never had a greater challenge as the Florida governor and the supermajority legislature have tried to diminish local decision-making of our school boards, our city and county commissions, and more. And since 2018, Fort Lauderdale City Commissioner Steve Glassman has been on the front lines of that fight. So, right out of the gate, I'd like to welcome you, Steve Glassman, and I understand you are unapologetically queer.
I guess I am, Al, so thank you, and thank you for that opening because you nailed it all on the head. I mean, that's exactly what we're up against, and it is a pleasure to be here with you today.
We're very happy to have you here. We always joke when we launched It's Happening Out 5 years ago. Gosh, I just can't believe how much time has gone by. We made the joke, the tongue-in-cheek joke, that our community, Wilton Manors, Fort Lauderdale, really all of Broward County, is the gayest place on planet Earth, and you get to help represent that today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Certainly, as you probably know, the city of Fort Lauderdale has 4 commission districts. My district, District 2, is without a doubt the most LGBTQ plus in terms of demographics. So it's an honor to actually represent District 2, and it is so important in this day and age to just be vocal. Be vocal about everything that's happening around us.
That's right, to stand up and show up and show out. We like showing out too. I want to start early because this is a great opportunity. A lot of people in South Florida community may not know you as well as they should. I hear your accent, very transplant New Yorker. Tell me about early days. What did you do before coming to Fort Lauderdale?
Okay, well, certainly. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up on Long Island, New York, and was there throughout high school, and then went to college at the State University of New York at Buffalo, where I was all the way up until 1990, I would say probably 1994. And then moved to Fort Lauderdale in 1994 with my husband, and we've been residents of Fort Lauderdale ever since. But for most part of my career, I was a teacher for almost 2 decades in Buffalo. I taught in a visual and performing arts magnet school, but I was always very much a community activist. I was always participating in things that were of importance to me, that I had a passion for, no matter where I was living at the time. And that did continue when I moved here, served on a variety of city and county boards, was always involved in organizations, and then ran for office in 2018 and was reelected in 20, and will face my 3rd and final term next year when the entire city commission is up for reelection in 2024 during the all-important presidential cycle. So it's going to be quite a year.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
I'm curious in terms of the opportunity of your reflection of the history you had in New York City and Long Island and Buffalo, different for LGBT and communities' response and interaction with LGBT in those New York communities versus South Florida and Florida broadly? Is there differences, or it's the same everywhere?
You know, I'm going to be very honest with you, because I think, and this was brought home to me yesterday when I saw all of the actions in New York City area and the governor of New York and all of the wonderful proclamations and communities standing up and saying, we're here and we love our LGBTQ community, and those words from the governor and other officials. And then I thought about the contrast with our state. And I didn't always feel that way. You know, Florida has always been, for the most of the years that I've lived here, a very, I would say, purple state. We have voted Republican, we've voted Democratic, but I always felt that it was a supportive place for LGBTQ community. I'm not feeling that, and hence, I have been rather outspoken at city commission meetings, basically challenging what we see happening in our state, because really enough is enough. We cannot continue down this road.
You know, it's funny, you left New York at the very beginning stages of Larry Kramer. I've interviewed Dr. Fauci in his last week at NIH, and we talked about Larry Kramer and the AIDS movement. And conversation came up very specifically about ACT UP. And it was a time that I thought, no, that kind of activism is gone, and we'll never see the days of that again until 2023. And I'm beginning to go, wait, we need a good dose of a Larry Kramer and an ACT UP to come in and say enough is enough. And do you think the LGBTQ community is up for that challenge? I
don't even think we have the choice. We better be. And you know, shame on anyone in the LGBT community who does not get out and vote next year. You know, I've always been rather amazed when I look at the numbers in Broward County. Broward County is the center of the Democratic base in our state. And yet, repeatedly over the last few election cycles in our state, we've just not shown up. And I mean the entire county. Because if the Democrats showed up in Broward County, we might have had different results. We have had so many razor-thin Senate races. We've had, even up until this last election, very close governor races.
14,000.
Exactly. Look at what happened in 2018. So we have to show up. We don't have a choice but to show up. And it's not even just the LGBT community. It's everybody that has been affected by the assault that we've seen happen the last few years. Starting a few years ago, you know, the first cracks that we saw where we said, hey, this is a little harsher than usual, was the transgender athletic ban. We saw that a few years ago. And that was the first time I really started speaking out against what was happening in our state at our city commission meetings. And it's gotten worse. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it keeps getting worse.
Take a step farther. And it seems to me that you're speaking in clinical fact. Those are all facts. They're well-documented facts. But the most important thing of the well-documented facts that you just talked about is the fact that we're not showing up, and shame on LGBT if we don't show up next year. The big question is, why aren't we?
You know, and I've had this conversation with friends and other folks that are basically telling me they don't get involved, and I don't understand the answer, because in this day and age, you can vote. You know, when I was growing up years and years and years ago, you went into a booth, you pulled the lever, the curtain closed, you had one day to vote. That was it. It was election day. Now, you can vote by mail. You can vote early. There are so many options, although, you know, the Republicans in our state continue to try and repress that vote. Like, for instance, we've had to educate our constituents recently on the fact that they thought that they had a vote by mail ballot being sent to them, and then the state just canceled it. They have to re-register for that. They have to reapply for that. So there's that educational component. But I don't know why people aren't engaged. Maybe they're just so busy with their own day-to-day lives that they just don't get around to it. Or maybe they don't feel the threat enough of what's happening, but there's a real threat out there.
Well, and let's assume all of that is based in factual accuracy, and I'm very confident it is. If the voices that are leading our communities are leading our LGBTQ communities, and you do both, broad community and LGBT, if we don't know why our LGBTQ community is not responding to the 5-alarm bell, and our community is not, what do we do about that to get them to pay attention?
Well, I think, again, it's a matter of still having those conversations, still showing up. You know, I find it so sad when I hear from friends of mine telling me that they're actually looking at other locations to move, to leave the state of Florida. And I say, don't. I said, because then they win. You have to stay. We have to stay. We have to fight. We can't just give in, because their goal is to make us disappear one way or the other, withhold health care for transgender community, you know, whether that's children or adults.
Not let a drag queen perform.
Exactly. I mean, they are really working so hard to make us disappear. So when we give in to that, and when we voluntarily say, okay, we're leaving, who does that serve? What good does that do? We have to just continue to.
Steve, you say make us disappear. Let me rephrase what I just heard you say, because I read a lot about this, and I hear a lot of very bright people that I respect characterize it this way. Governor Desantis literally is not going to be satisfied until he pushes us back into the closet. Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
I think we are seeing now Anita Bryant on steroids. That's what's happening right now, and it's obvious. And I think it's more dangerous than even just pushing us back in the closet. Mm-hmm. And I mean, how do you tell a person that they cannot have health care? Whether that's a transgender person or a woman. How do you say to a woman who might not have a lot of funds that, you know what, we are now in the deep South now. Look at the block of states that are banning abortion. Where does a woman that does not have the means go? How does that person get to a state where healthcare will be provided if she's in danger? And you hear more and more stories now of folks that, you know, this is not really about a fetus that you could detect a heartbeat. This is really about what's happening to women who are coming dangerously close to dying because no one will assist them. Mm-hmm. No one will provide them with a service when their life is on the line. So it's more dangerous than just pushing us back in the closet.
You know, you give two examples. We've reported at Queer News tonight, Pasco County is considering, the school board in Pasco County is considering this new implementation of sex education in the schools, and saying that you can't teach about prevention of STIs through condom use, and with the exception of abstinence, and that means you can't talk about AIDS prevention and HIV prevention. This is an issue that they're focusing on every aspect of community, of controlling lives.
Yes, and it's worse now than ever. You know, these are the debates that we've had years and years and years ago, and now we're having them again.
Yeah, we thought it was all resolved.
We thought it was done. We thought we had moved on. We thought we had marriage equality. We thought whoever thought Roe versus Wade would be overturned. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if folks that are running the red states want to return to the 1950s. It's a mindset that I just find so insidious.
Why are they doing that? From your seat, and you stand in both lanes, from the politics of community, local community, and LGBT, and representing our community in that place that you set. Why are they doing that? Why are they making these choices to return to the 1950s?
I think there are several factors. I think when Trump was elected president, it emboldened folks that had always felt left out or had grievance. So much of this is about grievance, where everyone it's almost as if it's a backlash. Marriage equality, while we're celebrating, others are like just stewing over it. And it's part of that, I think it's part of that backlash where, you wrap all of these grievances into one big grievance, and they just want to keep hammering it. So they want to go after education. We haven't talked about that. I was a teacher for almost 2 decades.
Getting ready to.
And to see what's happening in our educational system, who's going to want to go to school in Florida? Who's going to want to be a professor in Florida when we see all of the actions that have been taken against our school system, whether it's local school systems, K through 12, and we know what's been banned there now, and then it's higher education, we know what's been banned there. So again, Florida it's in the eye of not just our country, but also the world. I mean, they talk about us in Italy when they say, look at a teacher who gets fired or a principal that gets fired for talking about Michelangelo's David. I mean, come on, how ridiculous.
Just last week I interviewed 2 teachers, and one has left. They are best friends. One has left the school system and ran an athletic department in a school, and the other is still teaching reading in class. And they both get emotional about where they're at in their school. And where they were in their school. And they characterize the fear that teachers are living. And it was an excellent opportunity for me to see firsthand both queer women to talk about the fear and the chill that's taking place in the schools. You were a teacher for 18 years. Could you imagine working in the environment in New York, living in the kind of fear that our teachers in Florida, in Broward County, are going through?
No, I can't, and I'll tell you, so many books that I taught are banned here now. I mean, it's like I wouldn't even be able to function. When I think of what I did teach and the way I taught and what I taught, so much of that would be challenged here. I feel so terribly sad for folks that are teachers now in Broward County and the rest of Florida, and to live with that fear, to live with that stress every single day, to know that your job might be on the line if you say the wrong thing or you talk about the wrong topic. And then what about the children in those classrooms? Children that will never see themselves in a role model, children that will never be able to say what their life experience is. You know, what do you say to the child who has a single parent or 2 mothers or 2 fathers? How do they fit in? You know, I saw a movie just the other day. It's a film from, I believe it was from Belgium, called Close. I would just recommend people to see it, about, you know, to 2 young boys in school and what they go through. And I just bring that up because I just watched it this weekend and it's right on my mind. But it's a sad day. It's a sad day for our children, and it's a sad day for our teachers.
Steve, last year during the legislative session, Don't Say Gay was passed, K through 3. We asked many times at Queer News Tonight, as we were following the development of the story, show us where sexual identity, gender, is being taught to kindergartners, and that challenge over and over again. And the answer repeatedly was, well, regardless of whether it is or isn't, it's still, we shouldn't. And so therefore justification for passage. And many advocates around the country, activists around the country said, no, all they're doing is just cracking the door open.
Right.
And they said, no, absolutely, that's not the case. And this legislative session, it expanded to the 12th grade, and more than 1,000 books have been banned in Florida. You, as a city commissioner, can't do one thing about that.
That's the sad truth. But what I can do, and what I have done, is every single time we've met as a city commission, I have made a commission report, and I have spoken. I've spoken about the bills that are being passed in Tallahassee. I brought attention to it. I write about it in my newsletters, because people need to be educated. They need to see what's going on. So although that does not fall within the purview of a city commission, I talk about it. And I'm a little bit surprised that more elected officials don't talk about it and don't speak out about it more at their commission meetings as well, because it's really important. You know, so many times I hear people say over the last 2 years especially, don't poke the bear, just leave it be. And I say no, because the bear is mauling us.
Yeah, and silence in 1939 didn't work out so well.
No, it didn't work out so well. No, it didn't.
Yeah. I'm curious in terms of what the issue is of local control in a city, what you do for the city of Fort Lauderdale as a commissioner versus what happens in Tallahassee. We've watched for the last number of years the supermajority being successful in taking more and more power away from local communities. At the end of the day, help us understand, viewers understand, what's really happening when control is taken away from local decision making.
Yes, and you're right. We call that preemption, where we lose control. We lose home rule on a variety of issues, whether you want to talk about banning plastics, whether you want to talk about gun control. That is a serious issue. I think people don't even realize that in Fort Lauderdale and in any city in Florida, a local government cannot even enact any kind of gun control laws. Unbelievable. Just recently, the Florida legislature made sure that we couldn't do anything about the waterways and algae and banning fertilizers, which we all know during the rainy, hot season, if you let folks dump fertilizer in the waterways, you're going to get more and more of the toxic algae. The legislature prevented us from taking action on that. So they have gone to a level now that is unheard of, even with regards to vacation rentals, which in many times disrupts neighborhoods. There are so many issues that I could tell you about where we don't have that control. And not only do we not have that control, but we can be fined and even lose our jobs if we try to exert that control.
I want to ask you about that. But it's so interesting to me because perhaps one of the issues that we're having difficulty in seeing the LGBTQ community respond to is that they don't understand how important local issue is for things that may not intuitively seem gay. Everything doesn't have to do with our pride parade or drag queens or sexual identity. Really, our lives are run through city and county governments and school boards that affect us in dramatically more ways, and we're losing our ability to have a voice in that because it's being taken away by the supermajority and the governor in Tallahassee. Do I have that right?
You do have that right, and I will tell you though, one thing I'm so very proud of in Fort Lauderdale, we have tremendous neighborhood associations. We have tremendous activists, and many are LGBTQ. So obviously, they're not just speaking out about LGBTQ issues. They're doing what you just said. They're involved at every level because local government really does affect people's lives the most. We make decisions that affect our public safety. We make decisions that affect our tax millage rate for property taxes. We get involved in so much that really is controlled on people's day-to-day lives. So it's important. It's important to pay attention. It's important to really participate. And again, of course, there'll be the opportunities to do that on a level of LGBTQ issues. Whenever I get the chance, I present proclamations like just recently for Pride Month. I will bring together organizations to stand with me at a commission meeting and go through those kinds of proclamations. I'll do one for Flockfest next Wednesday on the 5th. Whenever I can bring attention to LGBTQ issues through a city proclamation, I will do that. Again, just to keep that
symbolism matters.
Yes, and just to create awareness, and to show that we are just as much a part of our community as any other demographic. And Fort Lauderdale is a wonderfully culturally diverse city, my district in particular, and we celebrate that. We celebrate that mosaic of our people. Yeah. We do.
I'm curious, it gives me an opportunity in talking to you to ask about gay. And in asking about gay, you're a public official for districts, for City Commission in Fort Lauderdale. Does it make any difference to you, or should it make any difference to us that we have gay representation as a city commissioner, or it doesn't make any difference? And, where are you on that?
Well, I think you could look at it both directions, but I will say that I think it's important. Obviously we have an openly gay mayor. And now we have, and Dean was our first openly gay mayor for the city of Fort Lauderdale. Never had that before. I would probably venture to say that I'm the first openly gay Jewish commissioner. So I'll add one more thing just to make it the first. Obviously, I'm not the first openly gay commissioner because Dean was. Right. So it is important because, you know, I think it lets, like we talked about earlier, about the younger folks in our community. They see that, and I think that's comforting, and it's empowering. So I do think it's important. Is it the end-all and be-all? No, I don't, because I think that you have to still prove to your constituency, you still have to prove to your city that you can handle all of the other issues that you will face, and that you will not just be, quote, the gay commissioner, that you represent your entire district, which is what I do. It
does move it beyond tokenism.
Yes. Oh, without a doubt. And then what happens is over time, I was reelected, so that's good. So folks must have thought that I did a good job in the first term. So I must have proven to my constituents, my district, that I can represent them and that I can represent everyone and that I can tackle the main issues and the very important issues that the city faces. We're an ever-growing city, and we're a big city now. And so there are challenges, and it's important to show everyone that you can meet those challenges in an intelligent way and in a way that benefits everybody.
You know, we just, in a different vein, we just put on Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television, produces, as a nonprofit, produces Stonewall Pride. And we just did the Pride Parade. We broadcast the parade, operated the parade, etc. in cooperation with the city of Wilton Manors. The drag ban was front and center. What do you think about what's happening with however you want to describe it, with whatever's going on about drag queens? What do you think about it?
Well, again, so easy for people to marginalize folks that are already marginalized. So easy to find scapegoats and so easy to prey upon people's fears and just fear of the unknown, fear of not dealing with an issue. But I will tell you, there is a glimmer of hope. You know, we've seen two recent judges rule.
Federal judges.
Yes, but that's good because we don't want to go through the state Supreme Court. That's not a good place.
Good path.
Not a good path. So yes, and they have ruled. They've done a good job ruling both on the transgender healthcare issue, and they've done a good job on the drag show issue. Very important. I'm hoping that that will be sustained as it makes its way through the judicial system. Very, very important. But what do I think? I think it's nonsense. I think that everything that was passed in those laws are redundant. We have those kinds of obscenity laws. We have those kinds of laws that protect children. Again, that notion of protect children. Again, reminiscent of Anita Bryant, save our children. It's the same thing. It's just a different angle on the same playbook.
Does that mean we have to bring out another and new pie then, if it's the same old thing, and that's how we're going to deal with it?
I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do. We just have to do something.
Yeah, I want to ask you about diversity issues that are going on in South Florida. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was on the stage with me. We talked extensively. The best, in fact, I have ever heard her speak about the attack that is going on here in South Florida, and really all across the America. And we got into a conversation which allows me to incorporate you. You represent another diversity bucket, you mentioned, Jewish faith. We're seeing unprecedented levels of anti-Semitism, or Semitism.
Semitism.
Thank you.
You're
Semitism.
welcome.
Thank you. Unprecedented amounts. Why is that going on from your seat?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, when Trump was elected in 2016, for some reason, people that had been in the closet with regards to their hate felt emboldened to come out. You know, we remember what happened at the rally, and we heard, you know, Jews will not replace us. And then the president saying there are good people on both sides. So again, that element of what we saw again continue throughout that term, continue on January 6th with the insurrection. For some reason, well, I do know the reason, they have just felt empowered and emboldened, and you're right.
Do you worry about that here in Fort Lauderdale?
I do. I don't worry about it so much in Fort Lauderdale, although I will tell you that every once in a while I get reports of us having to clean up swastikas that are that are drawn on city light posts or traffic lights or walls. Again, it's always easy for folks to go after people that are already marginalized or just never have been totally free to be themselves. And that's whether it's the Jewish community, the LGBT community, the Black community, again, Asian community. Florida just recently passed a law, Chinese people can't buy property. Is that an attack on the Asian community? You tell me. But I can go through so many different demographics of folks that have been targets. But again, when is enough enough? All of these groups have got to come together now. It's time. Speaking of which, I'm very happy to be participating this Sunday, July 2nd, We the People March. That's going to be, I'm predicting that's going to be a big rally and a big march. And I would encourage viewers to go to WTPmarch.org, check out all the information. More than 50 organizations will be at Esplanade Park in District 2, Fort Lauderdale. I'm very proud of that. And we're going to make a statement. We're going to say, we have got to put an end to this.
I've just finished an interview with Ebony Crispin from AHF, one of the principal architect organizers. And it's interesting to me because she said almost the exact sentence that you have said today, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And that's the motivation for it. I'm curious, though, when you stand up, you're an elected official in Fort Lauderdale, you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable to a governor that could be capricious to you. I interviewed the state attorney in Hillsborough County that was removed.
Yes.
In his opposition. We've watched it with school boards in removals. I know going into Stonewall Pride, there was much discussion about the concern that the governor would come in and remove a city commissioner or perhaps a city manager or even a police chief and maybe even a mayor. There was lots of conversation about this. Is this something you worry about, you personally as city commissioner in Fort Lauderdale? The governor, if I don't enforce or I don't participate in the way that I'm supposed to fall in line, I'm worried that he might remove me.
Well, it's crossed my mind, but I am not one to operate out of fear. I'm certainly not going to go back into the closet. If I feel that people are being unfairly attacked and hurt, I have to speak up. I mean, and I will tell you, if something happened like that, I would just have to deal with it at the present time. But I can't operate from worrying about it. We are all very familiar with the slogan, silence equals death. And I think we can't even get close to that line again. How can we just remain silent? How can we worry about our own personal job? You asked me if I'm worried about my position. That's my job. It doesn't mean that that's my life. So that's more important, and I would continue to speak out. Of course, I would want to work to save my position. What happened to the state attorney is horrendous because there was no action really taken. It was just free speech. It was voicing an opinion that
expressed an opinion.
Exactly, expressed an opinion. It was not even an action taken, especially as his role as a state attorney, an elected state attorney. So that's chilling.
And by the way, the same thing that's going on in Florida goes on in Belarus and Russia. Similar situation. I'm curious in terms of the political thought from your standpoint. Broward, you've explained, Broward County is Fort Lauderdale, the city of Fort Lauderdale, incredibly important for next year. I continue to hear this growing conversation that I'm in favor of Trump because he's the opposition of Desantis. And I'm hearing a lot of that in the gay community. What do you think about that concept? That in the meantime, Biden can beat Trump. I'm not sure about DeSantis, so therefore, and if it's a choice of the two, DeSantis or Trump, I'm pro-Trump.
Well, first of all, I would hope that no one is even going to be voting in that primary, in the Republican primary, for Trump versus DeSantis. I know I certainly won't be able to vote.
Approximately 27% surveys show in LGBT are in that stream.
Well, look at the trifecta we have representing Florida in the Republican primary.
Right.
Think about the trifecta. Right. I mean, what do we have? We have Trump, DeSantis, and Suarez. I don't know, do I have to go on with that thought? But I don't even try to think about that as much, but I could see the argument where maybe you would hope that Trump would be better to...
Is it just wishful thinking? Is queer community talking about something like, well, gosh, if it's DeSantis, then at least Trump's better than that? Is that just wishful thinking that we're just going, God, this guy is so bad for marginalized communities that once upon a time we thought Trump was as anti-democratic as you could get, but he's not that anti-democratic? Is that just wishful thinking?
I think it is, and I don't even know if we should be spending too much time on thinking about it, or we should focus our energies and our time in a different direction. Let them sort that all out. Let the nation see if they want a DeSantis to replicate what he's done in Florida on a national level. Let's see how comfortable people are with that. But first we have to be able to educate them what's happened in Florida so that the nation is aware very specifically about what we have had to endure.
To the specific point that you just mentioned, I was interviewing Dean at Stonewall Pride, and we were live when he did it, and I asked him about his crystal ball and what he saw for next year. And he thinks, he expressed the opinion, I challenged him on it, that he thinks that DeSantis will pull out by the 4th or 5th primary because, specifically to the point that you just made, he won't be able to sell Florida to the rest of the country, that the early primary states for the GOP, he's not going to have success with it. What do you think about that? That DeSantis is not going to be in the long haul because many other states, Iowa, New Hampshire, even South Carolina, are not going to want the brand, the Florida brand that he's going to export. What do you think about that?
Well, I tend to agree with that. I think they won't want the brand. Do I think that he'll leave after just a few primaries? I'm not so sure. He'll have lots of money. So much of that will also depend on what happens with the legal cases that the former president is facing. And how well that's accepted by his party. Although, if you look at the latest polls, it doesn't seem to be phasing anybody. He just keeps enlarging his lead over DeSantis. DeSantis does not seem to have received, I think, the response that he was hoping for. The traction doesn't quite seem to be there, but there are others that are speaking more, and we just had another entry yesterday, so the field's getting rather large. We'll see how long they all last, but I think it's hard to believe that August, in just a few short months, we're going to get to watch and sit back and enjoy the first Republican debate on nationwide TV, and won't that be a show?
Are you bringing the popcorn, or am I?
I don't know, but won't that be a show?
It will be a show. I want to talk about a couple of things locally that made news since the opportunity to be able to speak to you. We reported at Queer News Tonight, and it got a lot of national attention at the City Commission meeting that Carvel Esterplat came to, and talking about the trans community and trans being such a critical and vital issue that we're talking about. They are facing, of the 1,000 bills, about 700 of them are aimed at the trans community and LGBT. The moment of the arm wrestling challenge. Tell us about, were you in the room?
I was on the dayas.
Okay, you were, and I thought thought I was, but I didn't want to make the assumption. You sat and watched that exchange. When you see a black woman of color advocating in front of the city of Fort Lauderdale, arguably one of the most diverse cities in America, certainly in terms of trans embracing and LGBT embracing, with somebody doing the challenge to let's arm wrestle to prove who you are. What did you think when you were listening to those words?
Well, my first thought was how ignorant. And many times I think it really is ignorance. And I don't mean that, and I don't want that to have a connotation that's insulting. I mean just not aware, not knowledgeable, not really understanding. Because I think so much of what we're seeing happen now to our transgender brothers and sisters is really based in fear and ignorance, and cruelty, and it's just mind blowing. So when I heard those words, I said, "Oh my gosh," not in Fort Lauderdale, but I had actually brought that issue up when I when I brought to the commission what was happening in Tallahassee with these transgender athletic bans, and really how a lot of the institutions that govern those sports agencies have that pretty much under control. They have protocols, they have testing, they have time limits, they know what to do. It's never been an issue. So when people do that, that to me is, it's trying to find a solution where there's no problem. It's just that. And again, it's a distraction.
Exactly like Don't Say Gay, by the way.
Yes, it's a distraction. Why isn't our state focusing on what really matters to the citizens? Property insurance premiums. You know, I can go through a whole list of things. Our state is flush with cash, mostly because the federal government has given so much money. And yet, what are we doing? Why aren't we spending more money on infrastructure? You know, sea level rise, things that could really help people on a daily basis.
I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to be crystal clear. In terms of trans issues, Fort Lauderdale is a city that is just unconditional on its support of trans community. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Unequivocal.
Unequivocal.
Yeah. One other thing that I want to take the opportunity to talk about is of something, frankly, that I never thought I would talk about, but it's an issue that affects queer community, and that's water and flooding and infrastructure. We all know the facts of what's going on in Fort Lauderdale and the problems that we have. What are the issues on the in the future, and what are the solution process that we're going to see in coming months, years, for infrastructure and water problems in Fort Lauderdale?
Big issue, big priority of the City Commission. When I was elected in 2018, one of the big issues of that campaign was infrastructure, because, to be honest with you, for decades, the city of Fort Lauderdale ignored infrastructure. We were growing by leaps and bounds. And that was all above ground, but no one was ever worrying about what was under the ground. So that was a big campaign issue. I'm happy to say that when those of us that were elected in 2018 came into office, we really did hit the ground running. We have issued bonds, hundreds of millions of dollars. We've replicated sewer systems. We've done a lot of work when it comes to water, stormwater, and wastewater. In fact, just recently, we approved a brand new 5-ash water treatment plant. Hundreds of millions of dollars of investment is going to go into replacing a 70-year-old water treatment plant. We have hit the ground running on all of those levels. What we just experienced in April with that severe flooding, no matter what kind of infrastructure we would have had in place, we could not have handled 26 inches of rain in 5.5 hours. That's just impossible. There's no system that can deal with that. And ironically, the areas that did the best when it came to that rain were the more developed areas, because the drainage system, the stormwater system, were more modernized. The areas in and around where we sit today that suffered the most were the least developed areas where we had not gotten around to doing that kind of infrastructure work. So I'm very proud of the plan that we have. We're tackling it neighborhood by neighborhood, 7 at a time. Hopefully next year 15. I'm trying to get us to expedite that, increase the number of neighborhoods in the second tranche, and also to accelerate the timeline. But we're very committed. That has made our goal. We do a goal-setting workshop every January. That has made our top goals every year, infrastructure. So we're very well aware.
You're optimistic it'll improve.
It will only improve.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Final question for you. As I said, we always make the joke, this is the gayest place on planet Earth, and very arguably it is. I tell my friends at RuPaul and other places, West Hollywood doesn't have Wilton Drive, and they don't have, a beach parade, and I can give 25 other examples. So we have Fort Lauderdale, we have Wilton Manors. Best LGBT community in the country, Wilton Manors or Fort Lauderdale? Which one?
Oh, I'm not going to go there. I think they're both wonderful. They're both fabulous, and Both very gay.
And very gay, exactly. And now we can see the politician of Commissioner Steven Glassman. He's probably made a very, very good choice. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yes.
I've learned a lot about you and what you do for our community, which we thank you for. And thank you for being with us today on Unapologetically Queer.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.